What's up, Leafs fans, and welcome back to Leafs Digest. Now, if you were with us last night in the live stream, you got to see some of our immediate reaction to the Auston Matthews play, but that has been the biggest news out of Toronto today regarding some stuff that has actually happened on the ice, and probably the most important thing going on with the Toronto Maple Leafs best player in Auston Matthews being suspended for 2 games for his hit, or his cross-check, I should say, on defenseman for the Buffalo Sabres, Rasmus Dahlin. Now, with this, I did see today that Chris Johnson of TSN has reported that missing these 2 games will cost Auston Matthews $116,000 for this miss. So ultimately, missing those 2 games, $116,000 totals out to much more than the maximum allowable fine under the CBA. So ultimately, he does get penalized a whole lot more, and with that, he ends up missing 2 games, which will hurt him a little bit on his quest towards 60 goals this season. And now, if you are keeping track with that and seeing where he's at, he will now have 19 games for the remainder of the season to score 15 goals. And to be completely honest with you, I still say that he does it and he has a chance to do it. But Goody, immediate reaction, Auston Matthews suspended 2 games. What are your thoughts on this?
My immediate reaction was there needs to be a bit more benefit of the doubt for Auston Matthews, who is not a dirty player at all. You referenced the stats before we got on here, but I'll bring them up anyways just because I want to touch on it. Was it 68 penalty minutes over 6 seasons? Yeah. This guy does not tread anywhere close to the line. I think what happened the other game with Dahlin was a very Dahlin, I mispronounced it, sorry. That was definitely a hockey play. I mean, it happens. I did look at it again a few different times, and there's a potential to really hurt someone there. Let's not beat around the bush about that. He didn't, though. Yeah. He did not, and he does not have a track record or a history of doing these kind of things. So to put him out for 2 games at a point that's really pivotal for the Leafs, that's pivotal for his own reasons of reaching milestones, it feels crummy, man. It feels really crummy. I don't think it needed to be 2 games. It didn't even really need to be 1, but to see it all the way here at 2 is really annoying, and of course, he's losing a lot of money because of this.
Yeah, and I did hear today on TSN Overdrive that Chris Johnson, reporter Chris, I believe is his name, on Twitter, he said, I think he deserves a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt, to be honest with you. So going right along with what you're saying in regards to the situation of him being suspended on that play, and he's not a dirty player. But I do think that there's some different things to have to break down to this immediate reaction of what happened in the suspension. Let me just preface my opinion on this whole thing by first of all stating, do I think that cross-check is a suspendable play? For anybody in the NHL at any point in time, yes. You cannot just go willy-nilly around the ice cross-checking guys in the neck. I don't care who you are. I don't care what the situation is. Retaliation is not an excuse in order to be able to do that. That's my honest opinion. That is a suspendable play, yes. But here's where my issue with the entire suspension itself comes into play. There have been 19 total instances this season that have resulted in a review by the Department of Player Safety for a cross-check. The first 18 resulted in a fine. Auston Matthews is the first player this season to be suspended for the cross-check. At the beginning of the season, the league and the referees were significantly cracking down on cross-checks, trying to eliminate it from the game, trying to protect players and protect the safety of players with that cross-check from the back, with it coming that way. My problem with it being called a suspension now is that this was game 58 of the season, or 59 of the season, and you have not done this yet. At the beginning of the season, when it was the most penalized we've ever seen, whether it be minor penalties or fines or major penalties or whatever, at no point had it been suspended yet. No player had been suspended yet. You wait until the last quarter of the season to hand out a suspension like this. What precedent does this set by the Department of Player Safety? And let me clarify on this when I'm saying the precedent. How does any player moving forward from this know what is and isn't a suspendable play? I could watch the exact same thing happen 18 times in a row prior to, and the guy gets fined $5,000. And then I watch Auston Matthews have it happen, and he loses $116,000 and 2 games of his season.
Yeah, it sucks for the Leafs in Austin, no doubt. But a big part of that question is those previous 18 plays that resulted in some league action over a cross-check. where was that cross check being directed to? Because Auston Matthews, flat out, you even said it too, it was a dangerous play.
Yeah.
Luckily, it results in no injury for anyone. It is what it is, and now it's just a suspension that's preventative, I guess.
Yeah.
But it does matter about the intent of the play. Auston Matthews went in there trying to hit him in the neck or the head, one of the two. Or I guess, sorry, you could say it was the shoulder pad. It rode up, but we obviously know how it looks. We know the potential to injure someone there. I get it. I mean, me and you played lacrosse our whole life. We're used to getting cross-checked in the face. Like, it's not that big of a deal to us, maybe. But to Auston Matthews, to Dahlin, like, I get it. It's the NHL. They got to enforce this thing a lot heavier anyways. But one interesting question, just maybe food for thought than anything, had that cross-check actually connected and, like, let's say busted out one of Dahlin's teeth or, like, put him down for 2 minutes. Nothing serious, but clearly, like, hits him, hurts him.
Yeah.
Yeah, and let's say not even, like, it's injured per se, but, like, gets hurt for a moment and is scary. Does Auston Matthews get more than 2 games, or does it remain 2 games?
This is where the problem comes. I don't know.
Yeah, me neither.
My truthful answer is that I don't know, and I think that is where the frustration lies with the majority of Leafs fans. I think there's a small segment who look at it and go, "Yep, 2 games, move on, whatever. That's the way she goes. I thought that was going to happen." I think there's a compartment below them that you and I lie in, where we both go, "Is that a suspendable play for the entire season?" Yes, everyone should have been penalized this way, but we're looking at this going, you haven't suspended anybody else, and we've seen this thing happen at minimum 18 times where it's being reviewed by Department of Player Safety. Why is it being suspended now? I think that's more where you and I come at this from in our reaction to the situation. And then there's definitely a portion of Leafs fans who look at this and go, "Oh, why is that a suspension? Clean play. Like, who cares what he did? Blah, blah, blah." I don't side with that. And I think we're on the same page in it. But I think this is where the frustration comes. And I think it's coming from a lot of hockey fans right now. And just that, how do you look at any single play now and determine anything moving forward? Marcus Foligno a couple of days ago, open ice need Jakub Voracek cutting through the neutral zone. And it was a very, very, very blatant intentional knee that he goes out and hits the guy with. And actually that, and I'm not saying it's worse or better or whatever, but that also has potential to seriously injure a guy. And what does Foligno walk away with? A $5,000 fine. And then it's like a couple days later, Matthews cross-checks Dahlin like that. Dahlin has no immediate reaction of injury. He doesn't go down. He actually continues to play in the game. Next thing you know, Matthews is getting handed a 2-game suspension. It's just confusing from the point of the Department of Player Safety, where there is no consistent messaging at all here. None.
Yeah, it is weird too, because it's got to come back to the fact that they're implementing rules that are built around getting rid of the cross check. And I know that's no mystery. Me and you have both already said it on this podcast, but that really, it does need to be at the heart of why they're officiating it this way. Yeah. Or I guess the Department of Player Safety handing out these kind of suspensions to star players like Matthews, who hardly have a dirty hit to their name. So it's got to be coming back to that core, because if you think about it, like, imagine giving a guy a suspension for trying to throw a massive hit from behind and missing. Like, there are plays every single game where something almost vicious happens, but someone evades it, someone pulls up, whatever the thing is. Auston Matthews didn't hurt him with a dirty play. Usually, I would think that suspensions are pretty much reserved for plays that, the contact is made in the dangerous area, and then typically the player gets hurt. The contact was hardly even made with the head, a bit of the neck, but, like, it just looked so malicious is the issue. But the fact that there wasn't any damage here, and you referenced the Foligno hit, right? That's somewhere where there is going to be real damage. However, $5,000 fine, really minuscule compared to what's happening with Matthews. So it's really disproportionate the way they're officiating the cross check. They definitely want it out of the game, because they're going to some great lengths right now and sending messages to star players. It's got to suck for him who wants 60 goals. It's got to suck for the Leafs who want their star around throughout this crunch time. And it sucks for the fans. We want to watch them out there. But it is what it is. Hopefully the league gives it a little bit more clarification on how they're going to deal with this moving forward and how they justified what they just did with Matthews.
Yeah, I am interested to see the justification on why the suspension happened. I haven't seen any video yet in regards to why they decided to come down with this discipline on this play. But I think even when you look at the player and you look at his previous history, he's never done anything dirty. He's never acted out in any type of way. He's 68 penalty minutes in 6 seasons in the NHL. Like, you're looking at a guy who's pretty much getting 5-6 penalties a year total.
Yeah.
total, right? And for them to hand out the 2 on this as well, maybe they're anticipating that he appeals it and then they just drop it to 1, but why get to that point? Like, I don't know with some of this stuff. It's just the entire handling of all these situations for me is what becomes confusing. And I'm not going to lie, I do disagree with you a little bit in terms of the suspensions, where I think you do have to suspend for the act as opposed to if the player gets injured or not, because there's situations where if you go out there and you do something like what Matthews did, maybe a guy like Dahlin has a little bit stronger of a neck than the next guy that he goes at, and the next guy that goes and has that happen to him ends up with some serious damage, and we never want to see that happen. And that's where I understand why they're going, okay, it doesn't matter injury or not, this has to be a suspension. But again, for me, the confusion does not come in this being a suspension. Is this a suspendable play or not? The confusion for me comes in that 18 times before it has not been called a suspension, and now all of a sudden it is, and not only is it a suspension, but it's actually 2 games. And that's where the confusion comes, where I look at this and go, I don't understand the difference in their opinions from 18 to now.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And when I was saying about the intent, it's more of like it's not exactly a clear point I'm trying to make. It's more of an interesting observation of how many times does someone get hit from behind, bounce off the board, soak it, and go back down the ice. But if their head hits, all of a sudden a player might be handed like an 8-game and a massive fine, and he's like public enemy number 1. To be honest with you, I think there's been multiple players in the history of hockey who have kind of like treaded the line that Bertuzzi treaded, but guys didn't get hurt. There wasn't an awkward landing, right? There's so many potential scumbags in NHL history when you look at the kind of stuff that happens out there on the ice. This is just one of those weird ones where it's like, okay, there was no injury, there was none of that. But yeah, you still see the precautionary penalty. There's just so many times in the game where I look at it and I'm like, wow, if that guy had gotten hurt, you'd be out for like 5 to 10 games. But because he wasn't, there isn't any suspension or any investigation. So it's just kind of like a weird thing to look at and compare.
Yeah, well, the other thing, too, that I looked at is, like, the Pacioretty punch to the back of the head. It kind of goes along with what you're saying. He punched Chris Letang in the back of the head in the game on Friday night and has not received discipline for that. And for me, my opinion, it's like, well, where is the difference even there? Yeah, it's not a cross-check, but he's punching the guy directly in the back of the head. And I'm looking at this going, there's a lack of consistency from the league that is becoming frustrating. And Goody, the final thing I think we'll talk about here as we move along is, as we kind of wrap this one up, is just, is the play excusable? No. Do I understand why he got to the point of needing to do that? I kind of do. And as a Leafs fan, seeing where he's at, where you're seeing the star player who's honestly always eating cross-checks in front of the net or not getting penalties called, the Leafs are one of the lowest ranked teams in terms of drawing penalties in the entire NHL. When you're a star player on the ice who's going out there and competing at the level that they are and moving at the speed that they are, and you're not able to draw penalties, at some point it's going to begin to get frustrating. And what I will say is that, again, not excusable for what he did at all, but you can see the frustration with just even the NHL in general starting to bubble up in some of these guys. Nathan McKinnon going at guys and throwing helmets and sucker punching people and jumping them after whistles and swinging his stick at guys. That is a very clear example of a player who's becoming frustrated because he's not being protected by the rules of the league the way he feels like he should be. And now Auston Matthews had not quite got to that point, but one incident we can honestly look to that is very, very close in the rearview mirror here, that penalty that should have been called on Jacob Chychrun in the overtime against the Arizona Coyotes the other night. Auston Matthews, after that happened, was livid. He was livid on the ice that it wasn't called. He was livid the entire way chasing back on back check that it wasn't called. The goal goes in, and he immediately is screaming at the refs. Every player is leaving the ice, and he's still screaming at the refs. Name me one time you've ever seen him do that throughout his entire NHL career, because I will sit here and honestly tell you, none. Because if we had seen it, it would be national news that Auston Matthews was doing that, like it was against the Arizona Coyotes the other day. That was national news. Auston Matthews freaking out at referees. Now all of a sudden you roll into Buffalo's game on Sunday, or the game against Buffalo on Sunday. He goes and hits Dahlin. Dahlin starts throwing cross-checks at him. No penalties are being called, and he just says, all right, enough's enough. You're going to cross-check me. Nothing's going to happen here. Boom, cross-check the guy in the back of the neck. Should not have done that specifically.
Yeah.
But it's also like, all right, no one's going to protect you here by the league rules. There's obviously no one on this team who's able to do anything either, and that's a separate issue for another video. But you're going to do something here. The NHL needs to look at the officiating as well as the Department of Player Safety and go, we have a different problem, bigger problem on our hands here.
Yeah, well, definitely. I mean, the officials have been really, really weird with the enforcement of the rules, and the way the league's been handing out suspensions, as we're pointing out right now, has just been completely inconsistent. So I definitely agree that that's something that needs a bit more clarity, because Auston Matthews, I mentioned it after last live stream with the Arizona Coyotes game, where I said I kind of get why Chychrun does that. Because Auston Matthews is one of those guys that naturally you need to maul him to control him. So referees are just kind of a little bit blind when looking at him to things that aren't completely evident, if that makes sense. Because the defenders are supposed to be draped all over him, making his life terrible. So you can't be calling penalties all game. So Auston Matthews, he just gets the worst kind of abuse. Connor McDavid's been in that situation. Nathan McKinnon, as you're saying, has been in that situation. And we've seen both of those guys snap before. Absolutely snap. And Auston Matthews is now having his moment too. And also with the Dahlin situation, Dahlin's doing his job. Like, straight up, I'd be happy with Dahlin. That's how you do it. Get him off the ice. Or when I say get him off the ice, like, get Matthews in the box, get their best goal scorer out, keep him away from your blue paint. Like, it makes sense that that's the way he's playing it. It's the referees that need to now start catering a more fair playing level of officiating to the stars like Matthews, like McKinnon, like McDavid. It's just the way it is right now, because these guys are going absolutely nuts trying to deal with the no calls and then having these boiling over moments that end up in suspensions.
Yeah, and it's just getting to a point where it just, as you said, boils over. Like, it gets to a point where it's just like, okay, I can't take this anymore. I'm getting cross-checked, I'm getting slashed, I'm getting hooked, I'm taking sticks to the face, a.k.a. Nathan McKinnon, and then they just go, you're not going to do anything? I am. And McKinnon jumps a guy and just absolutely beats the wheels off him while he's laying on the ground still and, like, going at the guy. Or Auston Matthews going at Rasmus Dahlin, getting cross-checked in front of the net and just saying, all right, you're not going to call these cross-checks? I'm going to do something about it. Now, does that give him the excuse to cross-check the guy in the back of the neck? I do not think so still, but ultimately then it transfers to the position of the Department of Player Safety and their result, and that is one that, on a normal circumstance, I would sit here and say, yep, makes sense. When you're looking at 18 plays that prior to that weren't suspended but were fined, and then you're looking at a guy who has 68 penalty minutes in his entire career, and he does it one time, he snaps one time, and you go, here's 2 games, that's when it becomes confusing. And you're just sitting here going, what? I don't understand. So, Leafs fans, let us know in the comments below what you guys think about Auston Matthews' suspension. Then also on top of that, let us know if you think Matthews can still hit 60, even though he will have missed 5 games this season, the first 3 of the season, and then these next 2 with the suspension. And then on top of that, I guess, what state are the Toronto Maple Leafs heading in here over the next couple of games, missing their superstar player? Let us know in the comments. We will see you guys tomorrow night after the game against the Dallas Stars. Keep believing.
Signing off.